I think science is a fascinating discipline, and it succeeds very well in some things and it utterly fails at others. The area that science is really good at is analyze how things function. But it really fails in trying to communicate what things are. It can never find the essence of anything, whether that's an atom or a molecule or a human being. They can say, yes, a human being needs oxygen to function, but it cannot ever get to a point of what human experience is like and what the essence of a human being is. It's not part of the scientific territory. I truly don't know. I mean, there is a lot of fringe science that speculates, and the business of science is to speculate first and then to try to find proof. So there's a lot of science that is on the edge of that speculation. I'm not sure that they will find proof. They may. It's not really my personal interest that much. I'm more interested in human experience. I'm kind of a nuts and bolts guy. I like to get up in the morning and say it's a great day to be alive, and allow life to show up the way it does, and not trying to control it or manipulate it to have more good experience and less bad experiences. So the experience for me is primary, and I love science to support some of the perspectives that I'm interested in. That, for instance, decisions emerge out of the whole system, that there's no central homunculus that moves the levers. So I like science for that. It really can understand a lot of how we function, but it will never get the essence. I would completely agree that the difficulty that we find as human beings is because of the identification with a mental concept. Personally, I believe it was an evolutionary adaptation. When we came out of hunter-gatherers and lived in large societies, we had to make mental concepts in order to function. When you plant some grains or something, you plan when you're going to harvest them, where you're going to store them, how much you're going to sell it for. These are all very conceptual processes. And it was very successful, so we evolved and our culture evolved to be more and more conceptual. And at the center of all these concepts is the self-concept, because it has to relate, is it good for me, is it bad for me? So it was a successful adaptation, and it's also very limiting. Because your awareness, your attention is trapped in that identification, in that process. And when you are lucky enough to realize that and see it from a larger perspective, then you can recognize it as a function. That it's very important. We have to know where we live and how to pay our taxes, and yet we don't need to be identified with that. The same way that the heart functions to pump the blood through our system, but we're not identified with the heart. So we don't need to be identified with a self-concept for the whole system to function. That has always been the big question. For the ages, all traditions have tried to find different techniques, whether they were koans or sitting and meditation, or all sorts of things have been tried. My belief is that it cannot be done willfully. It's not a matter of I'm disconnecting from myself, because it's part of the same concept that tries to disconnect from itself. What I believe is that they're conducive conditions, and I'm very interested in what I'm working with researchers on is to understand why this identification is happening. What is the dynamic? And the long and short of it is that it really is a mechanism for protection. That when we perceive any kind of threat or any kind of opportunity, then immediately we focus, it narrows our focus. It's like there's a deer running and we want to see where the deer is, or where the bear is about to jump at us. So our awareness narrows and sees the world through the self-concept. So really the antidote to that is to recognize that mechanism and to recognize the underlying safety. You know, these mechanisms evolved hundreds of thousands of years ago, and they still drive us today, but we live in a very different environment. And in our environment, it's silly to get, you know, upset if somebody takes our parking place, you know, but the emotional system reacts as if, you know, we're just about to be killed, you know, that we're truly threatened. So it's an awareness cognitively that we react to threats as if our life were at stake. And then there's a sensory component to relax the whole system, the whole body, and have your awareness throughout your body and not only in your cognitive head. It's absolutely correct. And that is why I believe that the benefit that we have of conceptualization now is not as valuable as it used to be, but the price is becoming higher and higher. You know, we needed conceptualization to have the iPhone and to have video cameras and so on and so forth. But we were extraordinarily successful. We can fly to the moon, we can cure a lot of diseases, but we lost really what life is about, and that's the experience in a moment-by-moment basis. You know, our awareness is 100% most of the time, 100% in the cognitive processing, rather in the sensory awareness of being alive. And I believe that there is a possibility to expand your awareness and allow the cognitive functioning to function on its own without identifying with it. I mean, even to have a discussion like that, a couple hundred years ago, nobody was interested in it. You know, a couple hundred years ago, it was interested to build better machines that can, you know, kill better in the war, or, you know, cure diseases better, or, you know, make better watches and provide physical safety. You know, so nobody was interested in other than maybe some wisdom traditions. But the general public is now starting to be interested in the quality of life and actually the experience of life. So I think that the balance of the benefit we got out of it and the price that we paid, now the price is getting so high that instinctively people realize something's not quite right. I'm not really connected to life. And I think that it's going to be a cultural permeation. There will be a few people that start, and the understanding will become clearer, and the whole culture will move out of being so conceptually focused. But if you look at history, our awareness has dramatically expanded over, you know, as long as the species existed. You know, the first hunter-gatherers, you know, they were looking around the next bush to find something to eat. Today, we're looking into the stars. We're looking as the globe as one system. We can realize, you know, the validity of equal rights and civil rights. None of that was relevant years ago. We understand the suffering of the other much better than we ever used to, and we're interested in it. You know, again, when we had slaves, you could not possibly be interested in the well-being of the slaves. That would have the whole thing fall apart. So over human history, our awareness and our cognitive perspectives have expanded dramatically, and I think that will continue. And I think that there is another revolution that's on the horizon that will shift beyond the conceptual identification, individually and as a culture. That's accurate, and I think that is individually a developmental process, and for the species it's an evolutionary process. For instance, if you take a 2-year-old and stubs its toe and screams bloody murder, it really believes, I'm going to die here. This is just very dangerous. An adult can look at it and says, when they stub their toe, it's like, that hurts, but they're not totally identified with that pain. But emotionally, when they get rejected by others, you know, or they get depressed or feel separate, they suffer very much. From the next expansion of awareness, we will recognize the emotional pain the same way as an adult recognizes the physical pain. Ultimately, they're all body movements. You know, whether it's pain or whether it's feelings of suffering or embarrassment or any other kind of guilt, shame, doubt, they're all movements of physiology in the body. And it's really your interpretation of these that leads to suffering. When you see them as signals as information, like I'm perspiring, it's hot, or I'm shivering, it's cold, and I said something stupid, embarrassment. If you put it in that perspective, you're not identified with it, and you see it as movement, and you see it as information flowing within the organism. And then suffering is not relevant anymore because you don't interpret it. It's just like a pleasant, unpleasant sensation, and it comes and it goes. Well, I think it points to the paradox that is often mentioned. The two dragon-like creatures that we see in the Far East sometimes that guard a gate, and they're confusion and paradox, and they guard the gate to heaven. And when you're comfortable with paradox, then you're halfway there. And when you're comfortable with confusion, you take the second foot into heaven on earth. And from an evolutionary perspective, seeking is natural. It's a natural instinct. And so you have that always something else is out there. And if you relate to that as a natural function of the organism, then you allow the seeking to happen. Maybe something is found or not, but what is always already here is the awareness of that process. So they're both true. There's a paradox. There's nowhere else to get but to right now, and seeking always happens. And that seeking happens in all areas of life, whether it's a mate, whether it's another job, whether it's self-improvement, all of these things happen. And if they happen within the perfection, then the improvement is just another movement. We're always seeking for food, we're seeking for safety, we're seeking for somebody to mate with. It's built into the system. And human beings, most animals seek and then they eat and they're satisfied for a while. Human beings don't stop seeking, they just more and more and more and more. We are kind of bred for continual seeking. And when you come at ease with the seeking, when you recognize it as a normal function, then it doesn't have the same energy anymore. You're not invested in finding something. You don't live in the illusion that there is any kind of goal to get to. I don't know where evolution came from. I don't know where evolution is going to go. All I can look at is what appears to be unfolding, and that is from simple to complex, and from very narrow perspectives to very large perspectives. That's all I can observe. The rest I have no clue. It's not a question that is that important to me. What is important is this moment right now. How do I relate to this moment? And what prevents me from being completely present in this moment is when the way that this person is built as an organism prevents that from happening, because there's something else that's more important. And they could be thoughts, seeking like what's dangerous, what's an opportunity here. And then my awareness is distracted from just being with what is here right now. And that for me is interesting. Where the evolutionary process came from or why the universe exists are not relevant for human well-being. We will find out one day or not, but to have a good time right now and to be present right now, it's just not an issue. Experience always happens right now. It cannot happen tomorrow or yesterday. Those are concepts that extend time. The experience is always right now. And when you try to conflate the experience into a little package, it'll always be empty. The research that I'm interested in currently is to understand what are conducive conditions for individuals to recognize the mechanism of self-identification. And what can we do to learn what allows individuals to relax out of that identification. And there are a couple of very interesting things that we find, and the long and short of it is that it has to do with perceived threat and really the utter longing for safety. And when we realize, this is pretty safe here. Maybe we'll get an earthquake, but there's nothing I can do about that. But, you're not threatening, there's no threats around, so there's no need to kind of contract into a narrow focus, okay, where's my danger, where's my danger? But you can say, right now I don't perceive any danger. And the more we can relax into the reality of being safe most of the time, the more we're going to be able to expand our awareness. I always say we are descendants of the paranoid and greedy. The ones who were greedy and had an extra side of beef in the cave, and the paranoid who put 3 rocks in front of the cave, they survived. And we're the descendant of the ones who were more paranoid and more greedy. So it's built into the system. It's not bad or wrong or whatever. It's just where we came from. And when we truly recognize that, we can start to let go of that and say, okay, enough of the greed. It's time to just be present, and it's a matter of really becoming aware and awake of what's going on. First of all, the Buddha, 2,500 years, that's nothing. I mean, that's yesterday. 10,000 years ago, everybody on the face of the planet was illiterate. Nobody could write, nobody could read, it didn't exist. And it's not one person said, oh, I think we should all write and read, and said, okay, and here's how you do it. It emerged bit by bit, little symbols, and language emerged out of the whole. Are we better for having language? Yes and no. I mean, we get a lot of things done because we conceptualize. On the other hand, we lost sensory contact with being a living human being. It emerged. So the question of better or not better is irrelevant. It depends on your perspective. When you suffer, of course, you prefer not to suffer. But when you rest in the reality that we are part of a larger process, then it becomes irrelevant because you don't compare it anymore. You don't say A is better than B. That's a function of the mind. Sensory experience is not involved. Awareness is not involved in better or worse. The organism naturally tends to gravitate towards something that works better, which means allow human beings to flourish. But it's not invested like there's an ultimate goal. It's a process that we're involved in individually and in the culture. So the same way as language emerged, I believe that a broader perspective and larger awareness is going to emerge. There is nobody in control. There is nobody in charge. It's a matter of how did equal rights emerge? Somebody said, hey, this just doesn't feel right, and it took 100, 200 years before it actually manifested. It was a culture back and forth. People living today are very different than 2,000 years ago, and the process will continue. So I think there is no way to step outside of the process and manipulate the process. We are so part and emerge out of the process that whatever we say, whatever our natural inclination is, will move the whole evolutionary process forward. So to tinker with it, yes, you come up and say, well, let's look at how do we create safe environments. But all of that is part of the same process. And you can go instinctively and you can reflect on it. And my feeling is it's going to move in that direction, and it has to take its time. No process can just expand like that. It's unstable. Language didn't come overnight and everybody talked and could read and write. And the same way I believe it is with a larger awareness and a larger perspective. It's for culture to really shift. It's a very long process that expands and contracts and expands and contracts. I mean, we see that in a political process right now. It's contracting again, And my feeling is, well, that's what it's doing, and it's going to expand when the time comes. And it's not better or worse. It's just the movement of evolution itself. Awakening takes time. If you look at a 2-year-old, you cannot ask them to do higher math. They need to do one thing at a time and expand. But as culture is maturing, the process of individual development goes faster and faster. So we will have more mature adults earlier in life than we ever had before. And when we were going through the Industrial Revolution, it was not important how people felt about it. It was important to get things done. So our attention as a culture was not about how people felt. It was all about how do we get this done? How do we gain more power? How do we have more control? And all of our mental energy was focused on that. And now we're getting to a point where we say, but wait a minute, it's not getting us where we want to go. We want to go to more freedom.